Hola friends! Hi amigos! Yo soy Nikki, de Nikki Bannister Language Coaching, and I am here for my second video as I launch my new podcast YouTube series, Your Best Bilingual Life. I'm here for my second live video with you all to share from my experience and get started with this series by sharing from my own experience and talking about the kinds of stories that I am going to be sharing from other people's. So what's important to remember is that mine is just one example of many, and in this new podcast and YouTube video series, I am going to be highlighting all sorts of different language experiences that people have when they step outside their native language, or if they're born maybe with more than one native language and grow up with more than one language, what their experience is like, how it's informed their decisions and impacted their lives, and how it impacts the lives of others and changes things into the future. So in my first video, I talked about how I became bilingual, how I learned and became fluent in my second language, which is Spanish. And if you missed that, feel free to check it out here in the series. But today, I am going to be talking about what my experience being bilingual, knowing more than one language, has been like, and how it has changed my life, how my life is different for knowing a second language than it would have otherwise been. And I've got two important caveats that I need to give you before I get into it any further. And the first is that this is just my experience. So there's a whole variety of ways. And more than anything, I am never interested, even as a language coach. What I do is teach other people second languages and help them improve in their second language. But I am never interested in forcing someone else or trying to convince or persuade someone else to learn a second language. Because quite honestly, for me as a teacher, if the desire is not there, then you're not the student. If the desire is not there, then you're not my ideal student, and why are you even doing it? So it's not my jam to try and convince anyone that they need to learn a second language. I'm here for the people that already have that desire. And if by happenstance these stories are interesting to you and it inspires a desire where there previously was none, then that is fantastic and I love it. So I would love to inspire you, but I never want to force you. Second caveat, as I share from my experience, it is apparent, but I want to acknowledge that I am a native English speaker and I'm a white woman in this world, and so my experience comes from that perspective, and I believe that coming from other perspectives is going to greatly change the type of experience that people have. I think it's a very different experience to be a native English speaker and learn a second language other than English, and to be a native speaker of another language and learn English as a second language. It's always a different experience and different process. So I am coming from a language that really dominates in the world, and if not is the dominant, it's a dominant language, and so it's going to give me a different perspective. But that said, I'm just going to talk about my experience, and in my series Your Best Bilingual Life, I'm going to be highlighting all different types of experiences and stories that have been affected by and impacted by knowing a second language. So thanks so much for watching with me today. If you watched my first video, you already know that knowing a second language has by far impacted and formed my career, because learning a second language became something that was so important to me out of college. I purposefully sought out jobs that put me in positions to use my bilingual skills that were going to further my second language skills. So with that, while I do believe I probably would have had a career in teaching no matter what, in teaching and training, the fact that all of my positions were bilingual or involved Spanish speaking was definitely informed by the fact that I was pursuing a second language and learning a second language. So it changed my career choices. However, it's also informed my travel decisions. It's informed where I like to go, first of all, because I find it more fun to go to a place where I can communicate more freely. And I also feel when I'm traveling solo that it's a safer decision to be in a culture where I speak the language. So I like to, it's made me a safer traveler. It definitely, it comes into play with where I want to go in the world and things like that. But more than anything, if I could put how knowing a second language has changed my life into one thing, not career, not travel, all these little things that come together, but into one big thing and say, this is how knowing a second language has changed my life, I would have to say that it has given me a greater sense of belonging and connection. And that is one of the most important things that we crave as human beings. We all need and benefit from having a strong sense of belonging and connection, and we suffer when we don't have that. And so I firmly believe that learning a second language is a sure way to a stronger sense of belonging and connection with others in this world. And it has done so much for me there. When people talk about craving connection with other humans, absolutely, I agree. But I am so blessed because I feel like I get to experience that every day by knowing a second language. I would also say, second to belonging and connection, that knowing a second language has given me a greater perspective on the world. And that one might seem kind of obvious, but it's so true. And I said in my other video that language is like the key that opens the door to another world. And it's like my world is bigger. It's like my world is doubled in size. And every language that I learn or even learn a little bit of, it's like these doors crack open into other worlds. And my world just keeps expanding. And that gives me this perspective, not of this is my little world and this is all that I can focus on, but this is in context of everything else, in context of other cultures and histories and points of view and how it's affecting other people. And it really helps me feel like I'm able to prioritize things in life because I have this large perspective. Instead of getting worked up or crazy about this thing, I feel like I have more wisdom, I have this perspective, and I'm able to prioritize things better. And that helps me live my life according to my priorities. I'm able to live my life according to what's most important to me. And honestly, I think we all want that because we get that sense of fulfillment when we live life according to what's most important to us. So for me, language learning has done these huge life-changing things. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about that except that it's kind of been everything. It's been huge. It's been life-changing. It gives me kind of those deepest roots of things that I want and need as a human, having a human experience is belonging, connection, and perspective and priorities, the sense of fulfillment. But I want to go in because I know that's this huge, huge statement to make, and you might not be convinced, right? But again, my job is not to convince you, it's just to share my experience. So I want to give you some more concrete examples of how this has all happened. When I first started, in my very first classes, learning a second language, so remember I took Spanish and Italian first, and taking those very first classes, I started to feel like I was decoding the planet. I started to feel like I had this secret code and I could understand things in this whole new light. For example, I live in California, and I remember taking a look at a map of California in my first semester of Spanish, and so many place names in California that I grew up my whole life just saying, oh, it's San Jose, it's Los Gatos, it's Escondido, it's, all these places that I would say, not thinking of the fact that they were words in another language. They're just place names to me, and I pronounce them in an English way, the way that I learned to pronounce them. But once I started learning a little bit of Spanish, I went, oh my gosh, so the town of Escondido, California, it means hidden. And so it's like this hidden little town. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Santa Rosa, where I live, is Santa Rosa. It's St. Rose, and there's a St. Rose's church. Oh, hi. all these different things, like the map started coming together for me. And the world made more sense just by the way that things were called. The names that things had started to make so much more sense by knowing another language. So I felt like I was decoding my world, like I was putting things together. And it also, knowing a second language, learning a second language has made things that were foreign not foreign anymore. Things that felt strange, things that felt different, don't feel different anymore. There's a sense of familiarity with them. And because I recognize I'm acquainted with the culture that they're a part of, with the history that they're a part of. So foods that seemed weird, reading a menu in Spanish no longer seems like all these foreign things and I don't know what they are because they're familiar to me. So instead of things feeling like the other and feeling foreign, they no longer did. They felt like something that I could understand, and people didn't speak foreign languages anymore. It was a language that we shared. And so simply by sharing a language with other people, it laid a bridge where we suddenly had so much in common. Even if I didn't know someone, by sharing a language with someone that I wouldn't have otherwise shared a language with because we didn't have the same native language, it created this bridge where it went, okay, we have a common interest. There's going to be certain things that we understand about each other and about our life and our experience in the world around us just because we share this language. So I felt suddenly like I had common interests with so many people. And like I had this bridge and this openness and this friendliness, like this, it almost like an invitation to start a conversation or something where it wouldn't exist without having that shared language. Because I can communicate with people. There's like an implied invitation there because I'm able to have a conversation that I wouldn't otherwise be able to have, where all I could do is smile. Now I could also say hello. Where all I could do is kind of look at someone before, now I could also give an appropriate greeting for the time of day or say thank you to someone. In fact, I was just talking with my sister the other day, and she may make an appearance on this new series, Your Best Bilingual Life, as well, but she was saying even just knowing those little phrases, so not being completely fluent, not being completely bilingual, but knowing phrases to say hello, to say goodbye, to say thank you in another language, for her specifically in Arabic, has a profound impact on the kind of relationships and service and friendliness and openness that she experiences with other people. And I completely agree with that in my experience. Also gave me so much more confidence and this is kind of in part, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what my experience has been like. Speaking a second language, again, coming completely from the perspective of a native English speaker who is a white woman, this has been my experience learning another language. It has been really fun to surprise people and defy expectations. And if you pick this up from my first video, then you know that I like to be unique, I like to be different, I like to defy expectations, and maybe not fit into the mold or the status quo. And so it is hugely satisfying for me to surprise people with my language skills. And the number one question that I get, more common than even how I learned Spanish, is why do I speak Spanish? The number one question that I hear when I bust out in Spanish is, why do you speak Spanish? And I love that element of surprise, and I also really love, I think it defies a certain cultural expectation where a lot of English speakers don't learn other languages, especially American, United States English speakers. We have this cultural identity that's based around one language, having one language that we associate with, and not necessarily growing up with a cultural mentality of, well, of course we need to learn other languages. And of course that's not a blanket rule for everybody, and there's plenty of examples that defy that. But I think it is still surprising to other people, since English is such a dominant language, it's a breath of fresh air and it's something refreshing when an English speaker is investing the time and sees it as equally important to learn other languages as well. I do think it's a huge advantage to learn English as a native language because it's a tough language to learn. And so having as much time with it as you get when you're able to learn it from birth is a huge benefit. But that said, I don't think any language is truly hard to learn when you have the right teacher. But that's a story for another video. So let me get back to my experience as an English speaker learning another language. On the whole, my experience has been entirely welcoming, flattering. I receive compliments and smiles all the time when I use my second language skills. And that's true in Spanish, which I'm quite fluent in, but it's also been true in French, which I'm a baby in and a beginner in. I received the same experience when I was in Paris and traveling for the first time this year in a French-speaking country. I was very, very welcomed. I wasn't exactly complimented on my French, but I found people were very welcoming and they were very helpful. Even just after receiving a greeting in French, they were extremely helpful, extremely kind, very welcoming to me. And that's definitely been the same in Spanish as well. And I will say that on the whole, and this ties back to that whole sense of connection and belonging that I get from a language, my interactions in my second language have been extremely sweet. I think that it is a very intimate thing to share a language with somebody. And I don't think we realize that. We don't get that sense in our native language because we're generally surrounded by a lot of other people, or in my experience, I've been surrounded by a lot of other people who share my native language, and so it never seemed like anything special. But in my second language, it feels so special. It feels intimate to share a language with someone else, and I feel like it creates much more intimate relationships. I don't get to know people the same way in Spanish, in my second language, that I do in English. I get to know people in a way that feels much more sweet, much more, I'm gonna say loving, just much more intimate and special. And that alone is, first of all, accomplished by the fact that I'm stepping out in a second language and there's already another level of vulnerability in doing so. But there's something very special about having that shared connection. And for me, it's made for much deeper relationships. To share my second language with someone else forms automatically a much deeper level relationship for me than it would had I just gotten to know that person in my first language. And I've experienced this. I've had friends that speak other languages that I don't speak. I have a very good friend who speaks Slovakian. And when I took the time to learn a little bit of the Slovak language, of Slovakian, and share that with her, we had some very, very sweet moments just from those little exchanges. So for me, the connection that's made is so much deeper, and it's an intimate feeling sharing a second language with somebody else. That said, I have also, in my experience, learning Spanish as a second language, it's been nerve-wracking. It's been nerve-wracking because I always, like I said in my first video, put myself in situations to use my language at a level that I didn't really feel comfortable in. And I was in professional situations where I needed to present myself as a professional using my second language, and I didn't have the level of confidence that I had with myself in a first language. So not only did it make me more nervous in professional situations that I would have otherwise been, but I also developed my personality a little bit differently. I felt more nervous being a professional in my second language, and I also felt really nervous being mad at people in my second language. And this is actually an observed phenomenon where we actually develop different personalities with the different languages that we speak, because there are certain things that we do and are accustomed to in that language that we may not do as much when we're spending time in our other language. So for me, it's really hard for me to get mad at people and be angry at people in Spanish. And cussing in Spanish is not something that I really do naturally. I know all the cuss words, but it's not something that I do. Now, Spanish is much more a part of my professional life, and it's part of my teaching, and I'm not cussing at my students. But in English, when I get frustrated, sure, certain words come out really quickly. So I've got this different personality in each language too. And whereas in my Spanish experience, it's been really nerve-wracking. That is in large part due to the way that I learned Spanish and the situations that I put myself in, because I can compare that now with my French learning experience, and nothing is nerve-wracking about it at all. In my French classes, the way that I'm learning is completely different than the way that I learned Spanish, and while I still get that welcoming and that helpful reception from French speakers, for me the process is entirely fun. It's entirely enjoyable. There's no stress involved in it at all, and there's no pressure either. I'm not under a timeline. It's just a journey that I'm on that I'm enjoying. So a lot of our language experience gets to be chosen. We get to choose what it's going to be like. And of course, I'm always encouraging my students to choose to make learning their second language something that's fun and enjoyable. Because the more pressure and the more stress that you put on yourself, the less effective it becomes and the less motivated you are to keep going. You're actually a better language learner when you can keep it stress-free and fun and enjoyable. You will get the results that you want quicker. So let me know, what other questions do you have about what the experience is like learning a second language? And who do you know that's got a story and an experience to share? Because I am going to be filling this podcast and this YouTube video series with all different types of experiences from different native speakers who learn different languages, and talking to them about what their experience has been like, how learning a language has changed and impacted their life, and of course, how it's going to change things in the lives of others, how it's going to impact their future, and I'll be getting into that more in my next video as well. So thanks so much for watching with me here today. Definitely tag someone who has a story to share. Let me know if this inspired you, made you laugh, or raise any other kinds of questions. And I will take a look at them all, and happy to answer any other questions you have about my experience in another language or how I feel it's changed my life. But again, it's those big things. It's those deep pillars of what's most important in life that I feel like language learning has given me. If I can put it all into one thing, all these little experiences and stories aside, it's going to be that knowing a second language and learning a second language has given me a greater sense of belonging and connection. I don't just have one community that I belong in anymore. I have so many communities and all these common interests with people that I've never met. My sense of belonging and connection is off the charts, and the perspective that I have on the world is so much bigger and broader than it used to be. I hope this has inspired you, helped you. I look forward to your comments, and I will see you soon in my next video. Thanks for being a part of the launch of your best bilingual life.